Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. My guest today is Kristen Peterson. Kristen is basically a champion of play and of children's play. She educates educators on what play is and how to bring it into the classroom. And based on some things I've seen her share online, I thought I really have to get her to come in and talk to all of us about how important play is and really to assuage our anxiety about those early academics and about kindergarten prep. Whether you have children that are little and aren't there yet, or you have children who are, getting into the elementary years, play is still so important. And Kristen's going to talk about that. She's so passionate about play and why it's so good for our kids. And really, honestly, if we want our kids to get ahead, this is what we have to let them do. If you're wondering about that and about why, give a listen to Kristen. She is just, as you'll see, so filled with passion and so many great stories about play and why play is important. So let's meet Kristen. Hi, Kristen. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So my name is Kristen Peterson, Kristen RB Peterson, and I am a retired early childhood educator. That might sound kind of funny. You can't see what I look like, but I definitely don't look maybe like retirement age, but I am a retired founder of a nature-based preschool that I opened in 2014 here in Minnesota. And now I am a full-time play advocate and public speaker. So I travel around the world and teach people about play-based learning in early childhood and why children need play, why play is essential, what play is and what it's not, all the things about play. So that's what I do now. And I have a podcast too. It's called the Play-Based Learning Podcast. I do a lot of stuff online. So that's me in a nutshell.
You have a lot. I watched a bunch of your Instagram reels too. You've got a lot of fun reels on there showing all the play in action too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think of you as a champion of children through letting them play and champion of children's play.
Absolutely. I think of myself that way as well. I kind of feel like sometimes I'm the Lorax of early childhood. Like I speak for the children. And sometimes that can make adults feel uncomfortable because I'm pointing out things that we do with children or expect from children that aren't developmentally appropriate. And that's just, it's like there's a lot of things that are done in early childhood that are just done because they've always been done that way. It's a watered down version of like a kindergarten curriculum. And we know that that's not developmentally appropriate for young children. So I'm here to speak for the children. Sometimes that can make adults reflect. Reflection often leads to like questioning, and that can make people uncomfortable. So
you and I have the exact same mandate, but through different arenas, because I consider myself a champion of children through helping parents, treat their children better by helping them understand life from their children's point of view, right?
Yes.
And behavior through their child's lens. So I love that we're complimenting each other that way. And it does make people uncomfortable too, the work that I do sometimes. Okay, I told you before we started recording that the reason why I wanted to have you on is because I hear so much parental anxiety about academics and early academics and wanting their kids to be, oh, my kid's not reading yet, or, they don't know all their letters, and like, should we be working with them? And just basically like a lot from the sort of preschool, kindergarten, early elementary years, I hear so much parental anxiety. And
absolutely.
I'm not an expert in that area, but I always want to tell them like play is what they need. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And I know that's what you teach. So tell us, just to get us sort of oriented, tell us about the study that you were just telling me about in terms of play.
So there's a study came out in 2023, so very, very recent, and it's exploring parents' beliefs about play and kind of the differences between play-based and academic-based preschools. So I'm just going to read a little snippet here a quote from the study. So it says, studies that compared the performance of children attending academic preschools with those attending play-based preschools showed no advantage in reading and math achievement for children attending academic preschools. However, evidence did suggest that children attending academic preschools had higher levels of test anxiety, were less creative, and had more negative attitudes towards school than did the children attending play-based preschool. So we know that young children need play, and we can kind of talk about what play is and what it's not, because I think a lot of people think that just, if something's fun, it's play. And that's not the case. Play is so much deeper than that. Play is the work of children. Play is the learning. And just because a teacher thinks something is fun or a parent thinks something is fun doesn't mean that it's actually play for children. So there's different characteristics of play and what play really is. There's a lot of play-based early childhood programs out there that disguise themselves as play-based because they know that people are looking for that. But in reality, it's very teacher-directed. It's not child-led at all. And there might be activities that look fun and there might be games and things like that. But if children aren't actually choosing who they play with, what they're interacting with, how much time they spend on those things, then those activities aren't actually play. So we kind of have to maybe define it a little bit. Would you like me to kind of give the characteristics?
Well, I hear child-led is one part of the definition so far.
Yes. So I'm going to give you the down and dirty definition or the characteristics of play as per a play psychologist named Dr. Peter Gray. So Dr. Peter Gray kind of outlined 5 different characteristics of play. And the first is that play is self-chosen. So the child has to choose what they're doing, who they're doing it with, and what they're interacting with. It has to be child-led, child-chosen. The next one is that it has to be intrinsic, so intrinsically motivated. So if a child is made to, they show up at preschool and they have rotational centers. So we have our centers out, like a science center and a math center and a literacy center. Those are popular things that show up in many early childhood classrooms. If children are forced to go from one place to the next and they're given a sticker when they complete their little center, that's not intrinsically motivated. It's extrinsic. That's an extrinsic reward for doing a thing. So it has to be intrinsically motivated by the child. They have to want to do it. The next is that it is guided by mental rules. So the teachers aren't putting rules on the play. The parents aren't putting rules on the play. The adults in the space aren't putting rules on things. The children are coming up with their own rules and their own way of playing with things. And then it's process-based. So it's all about the journey of the play and not necessarily an end result. And this one is interesting because a lot of times parents, myself included, I look at certain scenarios of my youngest son in play and I'm thinking, well, here, I'll give you an example. So he had some friends over and they were playing a game outside. And I went outside just to sit in my lawn chair and read a book and was over listening. And they were just standing in the middle of the yard and they were talking about how they were going to play this game. They were doing this imaginative scenario. And so they're like, and then you're going to say this, da, 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 da. And then I'm going to take my stick and I'm going to dab you with my stick. And then you're going to fall down. And they played this whole interior, they talked this whole scenario out. It was 20 minutes of this giant play scene that they were it was they were creating a play. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fun to watch. And then all of a sudden one of them was like, I'm hungry. Let's go get a snack. And then when they came back outside, they didn't play it. And I was like, aren't you going to play it? You played this whole scenario out. You planned this whole thing. Aren't you going to play it? And they're like, we already did.
That was the thing.
That was the process. That was the game. That was how they did it. And to me, my adult goggles looking in on them, I'm thinking, you didn't even do anything. You just stood there and talked. But that was the play for them. That was the game. That was what their mental rules were making that game up. They were intrinsically motivated to do it. It was all about the process. There was no end product. So it's all about the journey. And another example of that we often see in early childhood programs is there's a lot of craft projects, the cute things to hang on the refrigerator that we all think that the at-home caregivers want. But usually those things aren't created by the children. They are given the materials and say, here, make yours look like mine. And there's a lot of adult help that probably goes into those things. So in like a child-led play-based program, we want to see a lot more process-based experiences, process-based art experiences, open-ended art, where they just create their own thing for the sake of creating. It's all about the process. So those are the kind of the four biggest: self-chosen, self-guided. I think I said self-chosen, but self-guided is the last one. So it's all guided by the children. Adults don't put their noses into the children's business and say, oh, I think you should play it like this. We kind of stand back, and we are more like hummingbirds versus like helicopter teachers in a play-based learning space. So those are the 5 characteristics: self-chosen, self-guided, intrinsic, guided by mental rules, and process-based.
It reminds me of parents who say to me, what should the natural consequence be? And I say, if you have to think about it or do anything, it's no longer a natural consequence. And so this is like, if the teacher or caregiver is involved in what the children are playing, it's not really play anymore.
No, not at all. Nope.
Yeah.
Because you just stuck your adult nose in there and you put your own ideas into it. And like I said before, our own ideas are so different than what children's ideas are. So another thing I think, like something to point out, is that there's things called play schema that we see a lot in young children. Play schema are patterns in children's play. And one of the biggest ways that you can see this as an adult at home is like when you have a 9-month-old baby and you have all the food on their tray, and then when they're done eating, what's the first thing that 9-month-old baby is going to do?
Trajectory schema.
They're going to throw all of the food off the tray, right? So like a lot of times adults get, frustrated when children take all of the baskets off a shelf and just dump the baskets out. They're like, why are you not playing with the things? That's our own adult goggles. Like, you're just dumping them out. Like, that's annoying. Like, don't dump them out anymore. However, they're practicing like trajectory schema or the fill and dump schema. They're dumping things out. That is play. But a lot of times adults don't understand play. So it's really trying to just stand back and just watching and observing and not sticking our noses into things, because a lot of times
and the whole point, like how I understand schemas is those are how children learn.
Yeah.
Right. That's how they learn about how the world works, about gravity, about, the physics and the relationship between things is through that unstructured play. So, and I think that this is a little bit of a segue, but I think this is part of the reason why it's so important to have toys that are open-ended, right? Or not even toys, but have materials. Just let kids play with the things that they want to play with, because oftentimes with a lot of those like sets and things, there's only one way to play it.
Absolutely.
Like there's only, so you're automatically taking away some of the characteristics of play. Absolutely. When you have non-open-ended toys for your kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. In a lot of play-based programs, if you're searching out to look for a play-based program as a caregiver at home, a parent, a guardian, definitely look for loose parts is what they're called. Open-ended materials. A lot of times it looks like junk. So you might go in and you might see a lot of recyclables, or you might see milk cartons sitting in the art area. You might see plastic lids from things all over the place. Wood blocks are like the original loose part. Sticks are a loose part. So anything that children can just like make into anything, like if you have a plastic banana, and I'm not saying like having plastic bananas is bad. That's not it at all. In the program I founded, we had lots of pretend food that was plastic. But like a banana will always be a banana, right? But a wood block can be a banana, or it can be a cheeseburger, or it can be a cell phone, or it can be a purse. You know what I mean? So that's just an example of why open-ended materials are so important for play-based, child-led learning through play.
That's awesome. And just let's go back a little bit to the anxiety that I was talking about, because you did mention the study of that, took away that love of learning and increased test anxiety, those kids in the academic preschools. But give us your best pitch for why parents should feel okay about not pressing the early academics and not looking for a school that has that early academic.
Okay. Are you ready for this? I have a few anecdotes for you. So I will start off with just the whole phrase, I'm getting them ready for kindergarten. So I actually just turned in a book to my publisher, and the title is I'm Not Getting Them Ready for Kindergarten because, and there's many, it's a whole book, so I can't put it all in one little tiny neat package. So I'll just kind of give you a few points here. So our brain is a muscle, right? It's a big, important muscle. And there are no other times in life besides getting children ready to go to college that we spend 3 years, I'm talking age 3, 4, and 5, like preschool age. There is no other time in life where we spend so much time getting ready for something, right? So here's an example. If you have a 2-day-old baby, we better get them ready to walk someday, right? So how about I hold the baby up and I'm going to have you move their legs because we're the adults and we have to get them ready. We need to force them to get ready. We need to force those muscles to be ready. So you move their legs. If you did that
Everyone
for 2
agrees
days,
that's ridiculous.
yeah, it's ridiculous because we know that baby will automatically get those muscles ready to walk someday because they will lay on the floor and they'll kick their legs, right? Their bodies are preparing them for it. They know that's what they need. If you were to look at any puppies, kitties, goat, they play, right? They're rambunctious little boogers, and you would never be able to tell a puppy or a kitty or a goat, sit down, don't play. It is an innate, animalistic, very, very intrinsic trait, very natural trait that we have, that we are just able as mammals to figure out how to get ready for something on the correct timeline. But when the adults put our own ideas into the children's days and what they should be doing and worksheets and long circle times and calendar time and all of those things that aren't developmentally appropriate, we are stealing play from them. And play is the best learning when you are little, just like any mammal. Bears aren't doing worksheets. Somebody once said, I think Leah McDermott said, she's your natural learner. She said that having a child, a preschooler, telling them not to play would almost be like telling a middle schooler not to do their math homework. It is that important in early childhood to let children play. Another example is, have you ever heard of the polar bear and the sled dog? Okay, so up in, I don't know how long ago this was, but I read about this in Dr. Stuart Brown's book called Play. He said that there was some researchers up in Antarctica and they had a team of sled dogs and they were tied up outside. And out of the corner of their eye, the scientists were standing there. They saw a giant polar bear racing towards the sled dogs. So you see that and you think, oh my gosh, they're going to have lunch right in front of us. This polar bear is going to eat all of these sled dogs. Well, the lead sled dog must not have been able to read polar bear cues because the polar bear was charging towards them. And the lead sled dog was like, oh, somebody's coming to play with me. And got it down into a playful stance. And the polar bear saw that and stopped and slowed down its gait. And when it got to the sled dog, they embraced and they did rough and tumble play.
Wow.
Yeah. The need to play and that need for connection superseded its need to eat. And they played. They played for quite some time. And the polar bear actually came back every day for a week to play with the dog. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I love that.
It's just such a trait that's in us that we can prepare ourselves for things, but we don't trust it because there's so much pressure put on us from so many different places that we need to get our children ready for kindergarten. My son, Knox, who's 9 years old now, he spent his whole entire childhood in play. I followed his interests. I followed his lead. He was really into numbers. He wanted everything to do with numbers. I would create things for him to put in the preschool environment because he craved numbers. He was adding numbers before he even got to kindergarten. He could add two-digit numbers. He learned to add actually from watching NFL football, adding the scores.
Right.
Yeah. So, but he had zero interest in letters and numbers, none. Or letters, not numbers. Letters. He wanted nothing to do with letters. He didn't want to write them. He didn't want to learn them. He didn't want to make the sounds that they make. He did not want to learn how to read. And he was scheduled to go to kindergarten when COVID was hit and everything was online for that full year. So I didn't send him to kindergarten because I knew that that's not an okay situation. And I had the capability and the privilege to be able to homeschool him that year. So I did. And really, homeschooling was play because I know that that's how the brain is built. And so I let him play. First grade rolled around. We put him in school. My mom heart broke because I took a picture of him on the first day of school. And he was like, I just saw all of the curiosity and the creativity and the wonder just drain out of his body. And he would come home every day and he would cry. And then he got sick. He got like a sniffle. That was the year where if you had like a sniffle, you had to miss 71 days of school. So he was home for a few weeks and then went back. It was just like really hard. He cried every day when he could come home. But I was like, we're pulling you out of school. We're going to homeschool for the rest of your life. And he still had zero interest in wanting to learn how to read. And I didn't force it because I was like, we're just going to be homeschooling forever. So like, we don't need to force you to learn how to read if you're not ready and interested in that. I knew that it would come someday when he was ready. And so second grade rolled around and our family went through a huge change and I ended up having to put him into school. And because I couldn't homeschool anymore, I had to work full time and travel around and speak and whatnot. And so he started second grade and I was so nervous to send him to second grade because like every second grader learns to read in kindergarten and first grade, right? They know how to read by second grade. He did not know how to read or write things at all. So I was so scared to send him to second grade. He didn't know that was like a benchmark that he was supposed to have already met. I didn't tell him that. I didn't want him to feel behind in any way. So I explained to the teacher. I sent her an email before the school year started. And I just said, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. This is what I know about the brain. And I know that he'll catch on when he's ready for it. And she was like, oh, okay, that's fine. Every child's at a different stage. We'll just, give him extra help if he needs it. And so he did. He got extra help. And in about March of that second grade year, so about 6 months, I got an email from the teacher asking if she could nominate him for Student of the Year for school because of his progress. He's like almost reading at grade level, she said, and it's been phenomenal. Like we've never seen any child learn to read this quickly. And so I was like, absolutely. So she had to stand up in front of all the teachers and she had to pitch about Knox and his story and tell them like, he came into the year not knowing how to read and he's almost at grade level. Like, this is phenomenal. And not only that, like, he's just a very kind child, like just the sweetest kid. And so he got Student of the Year for the whole entire school because the staff were blown away. They had never seen anything like it. And I attribute it to play. Like, he got to play. His brain got to build those building blocks. And when he was ready to learn to read, that was about the time frame because they usually say like 7 or 8 years old is when it kind of all finally clicks in your brain. And it's a lot easier to learn how to read. That's why like Finland doesn't have any formal schooling until children are 7 years old, 7 or 8. They don't start to learn to read until they're that age either in Finland. And they have one of the best education systems in the world. It is the best. So I attribute it to play. He got to play and he got to wait until his brain was ready to learn something. And it took him 6 months to learn what everybody else took 2.5 years to learn. So that's just an example of like how powerful play is and that we can trust the brain. We can trust the huge amounts of research that are out there that support play and like give that gift to our children because it really is like if we are taking away play, we are taking away the opportunity to learn in a healthy, like in the best way. Like play is the best way to learn when you're young. So I don't know. There's so many things that point to play out there, but then there's so much fear that's put on us as early childhood educators and also as parents that your child's not going to be ready for kindergarten if you don't do these things. If you don't sign up for the next newest ABC app, like your child's not going to be ready for kindergarten. There's a lot of people who are making a lot of money feeding into that
Kindergarten readiness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I read this book. Do you know Ginny Urich's book, Till the Streetlights Come On? I think it's
No.
called. The 1,000 Hours Outside Woman. So in her book, she compared a kindergarten readiness list from 30 years ago to a kindergarten readiness list from today. And it was shocking, the difference. Like kindergarten readiness from 30 years ago was like, can, jump, with 2 feet, can
Yeah.
walk toe to toe at a line. Like it was all sort of
Yeah.
like these physical markers of maturity and coordination, compared to like can count to 100, or I don't know what it
Yeah.
is today, but that things have changed a lot over time is my point. The expectations, and I think it's like that the fear of the rat race, right? The fear
Absolutely.
that if our kid's going to fall behind and they're not going to know Mandarin, or they're not going to know how to read by the time they get into kindergarten. And I actually would like to take it a little bit further and say, like, I think probably the style of learning that you teach and support would actually be better for kids in
Oh,
terms of like the
totally.
creativity and
Oh
thinking
my gosh.
skills.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So, have you heard of the NASA creativity study?
I have, but tell our listeners
Okay.
about it.
So, I actually did some digging to see if I could actually find the full study, and we were not able to find the full study. But Dr. George Land did a TED Talk, and so I watched his whole TED Talk, and he, in the TED Talk, states that he did a study with his wife, Dr. Beth Jarman, for NASA. NASA wanted to hire the most creative astronauts to be able to go up into outer space. So they gave the astronauts this test of creativity to see how much creativity they had. And only 2% of adults can pass it. And Dr. George Land says that they've given over 1 million adults this test, and only 2% of adults can pass this test. So him and his wife decided to give the same test to 4 and 5-year-old children. They wanted to see what percent of 4 and 5-year-old children could pass the test. Same test. They gave it to 1,600 4 and 5-year-olds. 98% could pass. So they made it into a longitudinal study, and they tested the same kids 5 years later when they were 10 years old. Only 30% could pass at 10 years
Wow.
old. And then they gave it to them again when they were 15. It went down to 12%. It was the same 2% as adults. So what they found that all of these children had in common is they all went to school. And school is like sucking the creativity right out of our children. And the interesting thing is if you look up the World Economic Forum, like the number one skill that employers are looking for in 2024, it's creativity.
Yeah.
But nobody has it. So early
Yeah.
childhood is really the last golden place that we can allow children to live fully into that play world. We have the capacity to let young children to do that because we don't have so much red tape in early childhood. So we can let children play. And it's so important that we give children up to the age of 5. And I argue to say like we should be able to play our whole lives. But it's especially important through the age of 5 because that's where like 90%, maybe you know this statistic better than I do. I think it's like 90% of our brains are built from age 0 to 5. So we need to give children play. If we're taking away play, we're taking away valuable learning that can be happening, connections happening in the brain. My friend Ray Pika, she's an author and a speaker. One of the quotes that she has is that we often just think that children exist from the neck up. Like we're only worried about filling their head with all of the academic things, and we forget that there's a whole entire body there that needs to be developed as well. And that's what's so cool about child-led and play-based programs is that generally in true play-based programs, we're looking at the whole child. We're not just looking at the academic pieces. We are looking at social and emotional growth, and we spend a lot of time working with children on social skills. We spend a lot of time developing fine motor and gross motor skills through play. And then language and literacy is one of the domains of early childhood education where we want to make sure that their environments are filled with lots of opportunities for early literacy and early numeracy, the cognitive skills. But a lot of times in academic preschools, those things are overlooked because in academic-based preschools, they're doing a watered-down version of kindergarten. And oftentimes that looks like very teacher-directed, very structured. Like we're going to sit down and we're going to do calendar time. If you see a calendar on a wall that children are doing every single day, like that are under the age of 5, even 6, I would argue up to age 7, it is not developmentally appropriate. Children should not be doing calendar time. There's like a lot of studies that have been done around that too. It's just too abstract of a concept for anybody under the age of 7 to really grasp. So we're just wasting their time.
That was my how I saw your reel about calendar time, which is how I found out about you, where you were talking about, I think you said something like, guess how long it takes for a 4 and 5-year-old to learn calendar time,
Yeah.
and you like
132
200
hours. Yeah.
Guess how long for an 8-year-old to learn about the calendar? Like 1 hour.
Yes. Like when you're ready for it, you can learn it so much freaking faster than you can if you're like being pushed to learn something your brain isn't capable of being ready for yet.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. Then when I
yeah.
saw that, I was like, I've got to get this person on my podcast.
Yes. So they don't need to be sitting down for long periods of time. Children move to learn. Children need to be up and running around and moving their bodies. One of the things that kindergarten teachers want children to have is executive function skills before they get to kindergarten, or self-regulation skills. A lot of times people think self-regulation is learned through sitting still. Like, well, self-regulation means sitting still and like being able to like keep your hands to yourself. So we need to practice sitting still and keeping hands to ourselves. You're doing the exact opposite, because the children, they're not born to like sit. They're born to move, just like puppies and kitties and goats, right? So self-regulation is actually learned by jumping and by running and by screaming really loud and by spinning and by taking risks. It's not learned by sitting still. And so there's just all of these misconceptions that are in place that we just have always seen it done one way. And so we think that's the way that it should be done, but it really is just having a detrimental effect on children. And there's another study that, and so kudos to any of you grown-ups at home or parents listening to this, because when there's a whole study that came out in 2023, again, that talks about how parents' play beliefs can heavily impact their children's success in school. So like if a parent believes that play is important and wants to have that for their children and supplies a play-based environment for them, they will do better in school with academics than parents who don't believe in play. So it's
I think, I mean, you mentioned up to the age of 5 as being the most important years, but I'd also, for parents who are listening with older kids, like I'm sorry, teachers, but I will often encourage parents to say we're not a homework family, so that their kids have time to play after school.
Absolutely.
I think the research shows not until middle school is
Yes,
homework beneficial to kids.
Absolutely.
And so any time that they spend doing homework or other adult organized activities is time away from play, and they're already in school for 8 hours a day, whatever. So I think play should be priority for all parents and all ages. Just let them have that playtime.
Mm-hmm.
If you were working with somebody, or if you knew a parent who is listening to this and they're, committing to having more play, if their child is more used to adult direction, because I know some of the research shows that kids can lose their creativity and ability to play. It's not regularly, if they're not regularly allowed to play. What are some suggestions you might have for parents who are like, okay, I want to make sure my kid has more actual real play?
Let them be bored. I think that's the number one. Like, I think boredom is the best creativity builder, and it can be really uncomfortable though for adults to watch children be bored. It's uncomfortable for me to watch my kids be bored. And I try to give suggestions and things, and it makes it even harder when screen time is such an issue, right? So it makes it harder for children to find joy in play. But once they get started, they generally don't want to stop. So I would say let them be bored is the number one thing, because boredom is going to drive creativity most of the time. You're home with some loose parts, like open-ended materials for your kiddos. Magnetiles are huge. I love magnetiles. What else? I mean, we had wood blocks and just toilet paper rolls. My son would be so embarrassed if he heard me say this, but like bra pads, I had a whole bunch of them sitting on my dresser one day, and he was like, "Oh," and he was using them as little like clamshells for his little superhero guys. So like materials like that, anything that you're just gonna like throw away, put a big box of stuff out and let your children just create with it. Have creative art materials around that they can use to create open-ended art with. We have that a lot in my house. We actually are doing sticker journaling right now because all of my kids are 9 and up. And so 3 out of my 4 kids are doing sticker journaling with me. So we just have like thousands of stickers and like little tiny notebooks, and we just have it out on the table all the time. And the children can go and make sticker collages whenever they want. So just making the materials accessible too, so they're not hidden away. But it doesn't have to be like beautiful and set up like in these beautiful play provocations that you might see online. Like just put stuff out and let them do whatever they want with it. It doesn't have to look aesthetic and beautiful. It might look like a junkyard in your house sometimes, and that's okay. Cardboard boxes, bring in cardboard boxes. Like that is the best imaginative, like it helps you just get so creative and so curious when you have empty cardboard boxes. Like everybody loves empty cardboard boxes. So find some of those and put those in their environment.
I have this wooden handled serrated knife in my kitchen downstairs that every time I use it, it was mine and my sister's cardboard box knife when we were growing up.
Oh.
It was like the knife for my whole childhood. I guess my dad must have been getting rid of it, but every time I use it, I remember making cardboard box things with my sister and using that knife to cut the holes in the boxes.
Oh, yeah. I remember one of my best like play memories as a child was I used to take wood blocks because we had some wood blocks, and I would make on the floor in our house, I would make very detailed like house plans, like blueprints with the blocks. So it was like kind of looking in on a house from the top, and I would make doorways, and I would make like the bathroom and the kitchen. And then I would use just random stuff from around the house. Like a deck of cards was the bed. And I would like make all like a big doll house basically. And I would leave it out for
The
days.
floor plan.
Yeah, people would have to walk around it, but it was just made out of like random stuff from around the house. And that is like some of my favorite memories is making those intricate, detailed houses that spanned feet. I mean, they were like 4 or 5 feet big across the floor. My parents
That's cool your parents let you keep them out.
Yeah.
I've heard that so much from people with toddlers or like older babies. Like they don't want to play with any of the toys that we have. They
Yeah.
only want to play with like the whisk and the things that are the adult things that are around.
So just let them.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
I'm hearing a theme here is that managing our own anxiety is one of the ways we can let our children play, right? The managing our anxiety about the kindergarten readiness or managing anxiety about they might be bored. So it really is it's managing ourselves to allow play to happen.
Absolutely.
And that reminds me too of that study that just came out about risky play, which I'm sure you're aware of, that, again, managing our own anxiety is the big part of just like letting kids do the play.
Absolutely. Yeah. And risk is so important in early childhood too. I mean, we could do a whole other podcast episode on that. Risk is like, I've heard, I can't remember where I heard this, but if you never let a child take a risk, it's almost like never allowing them to hold a pencil. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. I've heard that if you don't let them take risks earlier in life, then they push them off until the teenage years when the risks are a lot more serious than climbing too high in the apple tree.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness.
So what would, if you had, say you're your kid's in like a straight up kindergarten classroom. Is there do you find it's at all successful for parents to advocate for more play in the classroom?
Oh, absolutely. The biggest change will come from parents advocating for it. So I think if you know that play is the best and you want to see even more play in kindergarten, because play is missing from a lot of kindergarten classrooms, not all, but a lot, advocate for it. Say, hey, like, I know that open-ended materials are amazing. Is there like a time of day where children can engage in those? Can I supply your classroom with a bunch of things? Can I start a drive to get open-ended materials? Another really fun thing that my kids loved to do is hot glue gun, or we use low temp glue guns, but low temp glue gun sculptures, like just having low temp glue guns and like building things is huge. And even just to have like some things like that in a kindergarten classroom where they can create freely and have a time in the day to do that. Even just having buckets of Legos, those are open-ended. having wood blocks in a kindergarten classroom. It's huge. So yes, parents need to advocate for play if they know that play is the best. And, I don't know, people live in so many different pockets of the world and have different access to different types of programs. But if you don't have access to any sort of a real true play-based program in your community, yes, it's time to advocate for it and stand up, because parents are probably the ones who can make the most change the fastest. I think the biggest thing is just to trust your child, trust brain science, trust the research, trust the educators who are there that are hopefully giving your child that play-based learning opportunity. And that's what we need to do, is just trust what we know and be developmentally appropriate. A lot of times those watered down kindergarten things in early childhood they're not developmentally appropriate. So we need to look for places that actually provide developmentally appropriate experiences for the age children that we're working with.
I think that's such a great thing to lean in on with your story about Knox and his reading readiness, and the story about the calendar time and readiness. And I think probably there are a lot of teachers out there who would like to have their classrooms be more play-based, but the pressure from parents, on the other hand, of my kid has to be reading by the time they finish kindergarten, or, wanting them to have that academic skills. And I think just we have to remember what we were talking about in the beginning about how early academics actually doesn't set kids up for success in the way that people think it does.
No.
In fact, the opposite, I think, is what a lot of research shows.
It is the opposite. And then you're also, you're giving children lots of, a negative view of school, because they're being forced to do things they're not capable of or ready for yet. And that can stress kids out. And so, let them play. Let them play.
With all the research, last question here, with all the research that does show that play is the best for children's learning, why do you think it's so hard? Why do you think that research doesn't translate as much as you think it would into what schools are like?
Oh, there's probably a lot of reasons, but I think it's fear. I really do feel like it's all based in fear and money. There's a lot of money that can be gained from creating curriculums and worksheet books and all of those things. So I think money, there's a lot of big companies out there that can get you to think in ways to further their businesses, maybe. But really, fear, I think there's just so much messaging out there that makes people scared that their child will be behind or not ready for something. So, it's just, I want to get rid of the term ready for kindergarten, or the whole phrase. I just want to they are getting ready. They're getting ready for kindergarten by being a 3-year-old and having 3-year-old experiences.
The play is getting them ready.
Yes. They're getting ready by being 4. They're getting ready by being 5 and having 5-year-old experiences. They don't need to have 10-year-old experiences when they're 5 to get ready for something. So
and I think that you have to think about what they're missing out on by not having the 5-year-old experiences when they're supposed to be having the 5-year-old experiences.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to ask my final question, which is a question I ask all my podcast guests, which is, if you could go back in time, and this can have to do with play or not have to do with play. But if you could go back in time to your younger parent self, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, wow. Okay. I would just give myself more permission to just slow down and be present. I think that that's what I would tell my younger self. And I think that really actually has a lot to do with just my personality and my drive to build new things and seek out newness. I love change, and I started creating the preschool when I was pregnant with my youngest son. So I've always just been so go, driven to create the next thing and the next best thing, that I forget to slow down and just enjoy the moment. And I can now make myself slow down and enjoy the moments with my children. But 9 years ago, no, I didn't. It was like a rat race. I think I would also tell myself, your children don't need to be in every single sport and lesson ever when they're 4. They're not going to become a piano prodigy unless they're meant to be a piano prodigy. So we can just lay off it for a little while, and we don't need to race from one activity to the next, to the next, to the next. Just enjoy letting them be little and giving them time to play at home with their siblings or with you or by themselves. So yeah, don't make them be in soccer when they're 3. Don't put them in hockey when they're 3. Like, just let them be kids, because that's like, it's more adult directed activities. Like, it's not play. It like me telling you what to do all the time, and children don't have very much control, and so they do get control over their play when they are able to play. So people are just generally happier when they have time to play.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kristen.
Of course.
Where's the best place for folks to go and find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, I hang out on Instagram most of the time. It's kristen.rb.peterson. And my website is kristenrbpeterson.com. So there's a bunch of free resources over there. I also have a podcast called the Play-Based Learning Podcast if you're interested in learning more about play. So yeah, those are all the best places to find me.
Awesome. And if anyone who's listening to this got any early childhood educators in your life, make sure to send them this episode and Kristen's info.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.